We are very lucky on the State of the Nation that we stay very, very close to the pollsters, and this is going to be a thing on State of the Nation. We are never going to go too far from good polling numbers. And joining us now, somebody who's becoming a regular on the State of the Nation, and I don't think there's too many complaints about that, and that is Gabriel Macon from the Social Research Foundation. Hi, Gabriel. Welcome back.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
We were a little bit spoiled recently that you were in South Africa. You're back in London, and just in time to get back to crunch some numbers. And it was your May-June survey that you sent out that has some fascinating data around politics and political support, as well as some of the other stuff we're going to get in around the people's thoughts around the economy, around BE, and even around some social questions that bedevil South Africa for eternally. Let's go to the headline numbers. Let's talk about political party support as per this survey.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Mike. As you mentioned, we're talking about the newest survey from the Social Research Foundation, which was conducted from the end of May and through to last week, Wednesday. So that's the time period that this was conducted in. And that's a very important thing for us to keep in mind while we chat about these headline numbers, because that period seemed to see the GNU return to a kind of equilibrium state. It was, throughout this year, we've had the GNU having the battle over VAT, and then we had the kind of awkwardness that was created by the Kill the Boer constitutional court case, which during those periods, we saw the ANC and the DA's polling start to move closer together. But cut forward now to a month of basically the same pliant, easy relationship that now exists inside of the GNU. And we have the ANC is now back up to 40%, and the DA is down to 26%, although it is up from where it was in the last year's election. We have MK, who have made a sharp increase. The first time ever anyone's polled them above 15%. We have MK polling at 18% off the back of the EFF plummeting to 3%. And we have the IFP at about 5%, the PA at about 3%, and that leaves about 5% for the rest of the parties. But the big story here is two things. One, the ANC and the DA will move back to equilibrium points if they are not battling. If I was a DA strategist and I saw these numbers come out, I would be incredibly worried about what happened, because when we polled, did a snap poll in April about Kill the Boer, we did a very, very short poll on it, but we collected the political party numbers, and in that poll, the ANC and the DA had a difference of about 4%, with the ANC at about 35 and the DA at about 31, with very wide margins of error, of course. But it showed that the parties were starting to come together. The ANC was starting to assault 30% from the top, and the DA was starting to assault 30%, move up towards 30%. Now we have, when there's no fight being fought, and the GNU moves back to kind of everyone gets along and whatever, all of a sudden the ANC skyrockets back up to its 40%, and the DA goes back to its mid-20% result. So there's an important lesson there for the DA, which is the only way you cut ANC support is by fighting them. And the best way for you to grow your support is also to fight the ANC. You force the ANC to take positions that run counter to the interest of their voters, and you will be rewarded and the ANC will be hurt. If you don't do that, then it returns to the kind of normal GNU position. You can't expect things to change if you don't force things to change. That's point number one on our political numbers. And then point number two is this MK EFF thing that we've seen. I mean, I was completely shocked to see the MK at 18% and the EFF falling as low as 3%. We have generally, I will admit to a bias in our numbers. Normally, we do get the EFF we do poll the EFF quite low sometimes, but just to make up for that, in the lead up to last year's election, we thought that they would get just above 10%, and they got slightly above 9%. So we did, in the end, overestimate them. But MK's growth and the EFF's death seems to be a result of, the fact that this kill the Boer debacle and has really shown that, the EFF seems to be all bluster with nothing really behind it, and MK is now the hot new thing. And MK seems to be taking a lot of the energy that the EFF has produced and turning it into its own momentum. So those are the kind of big political numbers from our new poll.
Now, interestingly, because there's one incident that you didn't mention which may have caused some movement, and that was, of course, the trip to the White House, the meeting in the Oval Office. I presume it doesn't play well when John Steenhuisen becomes the bootlicker of Cyril Ramaphosa, as he was in Washington. It looked like, to me, it seems like those incidents are online. The one looked like he was in charge, the other one looked like he was a lackey.
I think that feeds exactly into the narrative I'm talking about here, where the only time the DA has seen significant growth and the EFF and the ANC has seen a significant decline is when there is a perception that the DA is not just the lackey of the ANC, and the fact that you could spin that narrative and you see for yourself that interaction, it continues to feed into this. And so if you want to be successful as the DA, do the exact opposite to what happened in the Oval Office with John.
Yeah. Okay. And of course, if one looks at MK to a degree, although subsequent to this coming out, there's the issues with regards to Floyd Shivambu, but MK was starting to resemble a political party, and I suppose what people are desperate for is an alternative to the ANC. So some stability plays into growth for MK.
Yes, exactly. And, the EFF, it's been around now for 3 election cycles, 15 years. What's it done? I honestly, the biggest thing that I think the EFF has done is to have the kill the Boer chant taken all the way to the Constitutional Court. That's their record. And the court case alongside the DA on VAT. Those are the two things. But voters don't know about the EFF's involvement in that, and they think that it's quite a shame. They don't like the kill the Boer chant. And so after 15 years, if this is all that it amounts to, then that voters clearly see that they need an alternative, and MK looks a lot like the EFF, except now Jacob Zuma's in charge, and he's in fact a better liked figure and a more respected figure than Julius Malema. And so it's a real problem for the EFF.
Yeah, and and of course, subsequent to that, doubling down on Kill the Boer, when all of your other surveys, which is not really in this particular one, but you've mentioned it many times, South Africa generally you would identify as quite socially conservative, quite religious, doesn't play in well to let slaughter anyone. So I think doubling down on that is perhaps not such a great idea.
Yes, and it feeds the kind of narrative that the only thing that the EFF is capable of doing is making a really loud noise with no substance behind it, and that this reveals exactly that.
Yeah, and looks like there is some life in the IFP.
Yes, I mean, again, there's where the sample size of this survey was about 1,004 people, which gives you a margin of error of 4%. So we had the IFP at 3% earlier this year, movement up to 5%. I think it shows that there's an increase in positive sentiment. The degree to which how successful they're being now, it's questionable, but I think their movement is in the right direction for them.
Yeah, and certainly a party that's moving in the right direction is Patriotic Alliance, off a low base.
Yes, definitely. The Patriotic Alliance we've seen poll very strongly this year, and I think that has everything to do with how well Gayton has used his ministerial position as a means of garnering attention and fame to him personally, which then reflects on the Patriotic Alliance more generally.
And interestingly, Gabriel, do you have any idea, just lastly on the political parties, if the DA is losing support to the Patriotic Alliance amongst coloured voters? It's kind of maxed out on white and Indian voters. Does this mean that any increase they've got since the last election is probably black voters? I can't see where else it could come from.
Yes, this is the secret hidden story that I think us pollsters have done a terrible job of talking about. I've seen, so last year when we were polling, doing the tracking poll before the election, we had the DA was about 5% of black voters supported the DA. So very, very small group. Every poll that we've done this year has had the black percentage for the DA at 10%. So it's doubled its vote share amongst its support amongst black voters. And I think that's a direct reflection of something that we talked about in the previous podcast, where there has now been a legitimization by the ANC amongst black voters that the DA is not the racist party that it was once tarnished as being. And so the movement is the growth amongst the DA is amongst the black electorate. And what's interesting is that there is so much more space for the DA to grow in that group. But the only time that group has responded incredibly positively to the DA is, in fact, as I mentioned earlier, when they are fighting the ANC on issues that matter to the voters.
Well, the matter has presented itself right now, and that is Cyril Ramaphosa's wonderful talk shop, the National Dialogue, going to cost South Africa 700 million rand to come to conclusions that we know already. So if anybody from the DA is watching, there's your issue right now. Let's have a look at you did some polling around questions around the economy, and I must say I do understand that South Africa has generally never paid much attention to the economy. There's almost this sort of childlike understanding of how economics works in South Africa amongst all South Africans. I was quite surprised to see that when you ask the question as to whether the government should stay out of the economy and let the private sector lead development, or vice versa, that the government must play a central role, 2/3 of South Africans think that the government should play a central role in the economy. I don't know if they watched the Zondo Commission, what happens when the government runs anything to do with business.
Yes. So one of the things that we were doing, I was trying to do with this poll, because in fact this survey itself was kind of my baby. I wanted to do a poll like this for a number of years, but up until this year, the looming election meant that we couldn't focus as we did on these types of issues. But what we did here with that question you mentioned exactly is we have a theory about South Africans, which is when it comes to if you were to ask people like large esoteric theory questions, like, who should lead development, the private sector or the state, they will respond in the way that they've been taught to respond. So the only people who seem capable of talking about the economy is the ANC, and they always talk about developmental state and the public sector must lead development, and we are all for development. And so there's this vague idea in people's heads that they think that they believe that the government should be the ones leading the economy. But that's why the next set of questions, we asked people 10 questions about what role specifically should the government be able to play in business. So we asked the next question, government should control what products or services you sell. Do you agree or disagree? And all of a sudden, the two-thirds who were in favor of government control of the economy flip to now 2/3 of people are against the government controlling what products or services. When it comes to where you start your business, people are set against it. Telling you who you should, if what prices you should sell your products or services, what staff you're allowed to employ, the race of the staff you're allowed to employ, how much you pay your staff, the what type of business you're allowed to establish, how much profit you're allowed to keep. On all of these specific issues, people say all of a sudden 2/3 of people at least are against government involvement. And so the issue here is not so much that South Africans actually believe that the government should be leading the development. The issue is that South Africans have been taught to say that when they're asked these questions in the abstract. But if you take it down to a level below where you say, okay, well, if it's the case that government should lead development, then do you think the government should be able to pass these regulations, which is essentially what government leading the economy means? People say, no, don't be ridiculous. Why would we want the government involved in our business at all? And so actually, people have a very pragmatic view and are much more free market in their leanings about how business should operate than if you were to ask these broad questions. And there's been I think this points to a larger problem in the kind of South African analyst community, where because we think that the average South African has done the same type of university courses, so they've done economics 101, they've done some political theory, so they understand these words exactly as you intend them to when you say them to them, like, government leading development or the private sector leading development. But it's not the case. People don't have this kind of large scale esoteric understanding. But when you make it practical to them, they actually do have a much better grasp of the reality of the situation, which is that the government should not be allowed almost any control of the economy in South Africa, given its track record, and they will respond in that way. So I think, yes, it is worrying that when you ask people directly, they don't actually know what it is that they're responding. But if you make it more practical, all of a sudden it's a lot more optimistic what happens in people's view.
Yeah, there's also another conclusion that jumps out at me, and that is what a poor job the business sector in South Africa has done in explaining what they do, instead of being silent and kowtowing to government at every step. Much like we used the political example earlier of the Democratic Alliance benefiting when they do stand up to government, business completely cedes control to the government on everything and always has, and are generally in league with the government, even though they know that they laugh at them at the braai. But the point is that they have given that control over to government, and it shows in your poll. Am I right, or am I?
When it comes to getting around South Africa, Pace Car Rent makes it easy. Whether it's a quick run to the airport, a month-long rental for business, or a vehicle to help grow your hustle, Pace has the right wheels right when you need them. With a wide range of reliable cars, vans and bakkies, flexible rental terms, and friendly service you can count on, South Africans trust Pace to keep them moving. Plus, use promo code SONA and get a special discount on your next rental, because every journey deserves a head start. Reliable, affordable, proudly local. Pace Car Rental.
Yes, no, completely. There's been, I think it's a wider problem where there's been no attempt to actually do large scale, like, economic education, and the government is not going to do it. The government is interested in feeding the public the idea that the only way that they will get jobs and be better off is if you cede more control to the government. And so it leaves, as you point out, it leaves the private sector and private individuals to do the education for people to understand that, in fact, it is government involvement in the private sector and in the economy that destroys jobs and destroys the value generation.
Yeah. There was an interesting incident, Gabriel, that came out in the last week, and that was that the CEO of Capitec Bank challenged the unemployment numbers. I don't know if you watch that, and this is more to the people that are watching us today. Clary Ferry saying that the unemployment numbers should be down at 10% because so many people have jobs in the informal sector, and our statisticians refuse to accept that as a job, whereas globally a job in the informal sector is a job. In South Africa, a job in the informal sector is not a job, so you're unemployed even though you're actually working, but you don't have a salary slip and you don't have a tax number, etc. And it's the one case of business actually speaking out saying, guys, we see the bank accounts, we see Mr. X getting X amount of money every month, and then saying he's unemployed because by your definition he's not. So it's those kind of things that business could push back and say, no, it's not reality, and it would do their own cause the world of good.
Yes, and I think, one of the things that has been a conclusion that has come to me over and over again through the poll numbers, I've mentioned it on your show before, but important to reiterate this point, is that when we go into the field, we have no expectation of what the voters are going to tell us about, the various questions we ask. We have no idea how they're going to respond to these questions. And so it's inductive research. We let the evidence speak to us, and then from there draw theories. And one of the theories that has come out to me that I'm most certain about is that the best thing that someone who is interested in seeing an alternative to the current ANC's governance model, the best thing you can do is fight them in public and make them make the points like you did on your show very eloquently. Make them make the points. Make them tell the voters that they aren't interested in improving their lives. They're interested in passing policies that will make their voters' lives worse. And if you do that, then all of a sudden, opposition, the broader opposition, the business sector, the DA, the political opposition, they benefit from that, and the ANC declines. Because, of course, it makes complete sense if the ANC constantly has to be going in front of the public and defending stances which are basically saying to the public, we want to make your lives worse, and this is why we think we're justified in doing so. Of course, that'll hurt their image. And if you allow them to stay silent and get away with just kind of skipping over the issues and not talking about why they're doing things, then you allow them to get away with murder, and you won't force them you won't force their percentage lower.
Yeah. Yeah, you won't. The people have no reason to not believe them. You weren't scared to go into some of the thorny, into the weeds when it comes to race. You definitely picked up on the kill the Boer type of situation where you ask the question: should people be able to say whatever they like as long as they're not inciting violence against another group? In fact, you asked it in two different ways. I saw that. I don't know if they didn't, but in any case, that got a strong response of people saying, yes, you can say whatever you like as long as it's not violent.
Yes, and I think this is it's another case here. So we did, as we kind of talked about, a poll on Kill the Boer, which had some very mixed responses about people's opinions and freedom of speech. But on this issue specifically, what we asked is basically, do people agree with the commonly accepted liberal definition of freedom of speech, which is say whatever you like as long as you do not incite violence? And generally, South Africans do agree. It's just over 80% of all South Africans agree, with about, interestingly, 82% of Black South Africans and about only 71% of white South Africans who would agree. So there's this interesting thing where I think there is an understanding in South Africa of at a base level value at the value level that South Africans are moderate and conservative, but also have these individualistic views. So they for freedom of speech because they understand, it's important to be able to say what you like. And this played out in a few other questions, but I'll cede the ground to you and let us get into that further.
There certainly was. You asked questions around whether people feel that their race is being treated fairly or unfairly in the country. And, that's kind of split in half, isn't it?
Yes. And, the group that believes that their race is being treated the most fairly, it's Black people in South Africa. And that the group that believes that their race is being treated the most unfairly, it's white people in South Africa. And so, it's almost a number like that. When you get it, Mike, and I see it for the first time, and I sent it to a kind of colleague, a peripheral colleague of mine, Dr. James Myberg, and he sent me back the response to that of an article he wrote in 1998. And on two questions that I sent him, which was the question of how fairly or unfairly, and then the other question, the one below it, who do you feel benefits most from affirmative action today? And on both of those questions, Black people identify that, they are treated fairly, and then on that they believe that it's the elites, politically connected, and business owners who benefit from affirmative action. And so James Myberg sends me this article from 1998, and in that he's got this line that says, the people who have always benefited the most from affirmative action are the elites and the politically connected, literally in that line. And at that time, he says, it was a document that was released by the Democratic Party, and they were hammered, called, racist by every single publication, end-to-end coverage. The ANC, every minister of the ANC called, how dare you say this? The reason we are doing this is, of course, is to empower poor Black people. And now we cut forward to almost 30 years from that article. And what is it? But what has happened? But that the average South African completely agrees, and they understand that the policies that have been implemented by the ANC, the racial nationalist populist policies, benefit the ANC and their politically connected cadres, and they don't do anything to benefit the average broad swaths of South Africa.
And when it gets to the more sort of social questions, does the racial composition of the teachers matter to parents? We seem to be quite united in saying not really.
Yes, exactly. And this is an interesting point that also emerges from this data. So just like I mentioned how, on economic values, there's the theory and then there's the practice. In terms of race, there's the theory and then there's the practice stuff here too, where we ask people a question like, how important is your race to your sense of identity? And people will tell you it's very important. And how often do you think about race? And they'll tell you they think about race a great deal. Then we go, okay, so you've told us these things. So then therefore race must matter. So let's make it practical. So does the race matter for your children's teachers? No. Does the race, if you were a sports coach and you were selecting a team, would you focus in on race? No, of course, don't be ridiculous. You say, we ask people, if your child were to bring home a date of another race and a family member to a dinner and a family member was rude to them, what would you do? And everyone says, I would chastise the family member for being rude to my child, because of course it's fine to have a multiracial relationship. So people will tell you, yes, race is very important and I think about it a lot. But then when it comes down to it, when we ask questions about how race filters into your actions, they tell you, no, I actually don't act on race at all. And so we have been taught as a society, again by a political class, I think, to say that race matters a lot and it's very important in South Africa. But when it comes down to it, in fact, it doesn't matter to the average South Africans. because the average South African understands, we all are individuals and we want to succeed. People should succeed on their merits and their character and their individual traits and not on any sort of group identity.
And then the questions, as we sort of head to the close here, I found it very interesting where you asked the question, what are people's successes in life due to? That amongst your black people who participated, they felt way stronger than any other group that it was up to the individual as to how successful they were. In fact, the lowest who believed that it was mainly the efforts of a person individually was amongst white people, who they overwhelmingly said that it's a mix of your own efforts plus your family, friends, and community. I think that's almost a bit of a sad answer, isn't it? It's a bit of a sad answer because it's sort of telling me that whites feel that they can rely on family, friends, and community, and whereas I think in South Africa, with some of the problems we have in the black community socially, they have to rely more on themselves than on people around them.
Yes, I think it's a reflection of that, and it's a reflection, I think, of, as well, that the average black South African has a lot less resources to draw on from the day they're born, from their family and whatever, as a result of our history. And so, of course, black people would generally feel, it's mainly my efforts. But I do think that it shows that on the kind of, minority side, I think it shows a sense that they have been told a lot, that it isn't just up to them, that you've received everything, you've been given the world, and so they reflect that. They don't think that it's necessarily up to them to make their own success, that because they've been given so much, that's why they're successful, which is, I agree, a kind of sad, tragic way to look at the world. If you should always assume and try to make it the case that your success is mainly due to you, and it's a really poor thing in life, and I think it's an indication of an unsuccessful life if you can't say that your success is mainly due to your own efforts.
Yeah. And then the burning question, should people solve their own problems rather than relying on the government? That to me is a bit of a positive thing, and probably because of the poor performance of government, that more than 60% of people believe it's not government that's going to solve your problems.
For sure, all of these things build into what we've been talking about here, this overall theme that the government tries to portray and make South Africans feel as though you need to be dependent on us for your success. And what has happened is that the South African reaction has been on the very practical level to go, no, you're completely off. We cannot rely on you. We need to develop a culture of relying on ourselves and then the people immediately around us, because those are the people who care about us. And people understand and know that the government actually doesn't care about their success. And when you break it down, all of these things, you take them all together, this paints this very, very strong picture of the fact that people have rejected in their own individual lives almost all of the government narratives. They'll tell us, yes, they're in favor of state-led development, but then when it comes down to it, they don't want the government involved in the economy. They'll tell us that, that their race matters and it's very important and we think about it so much, but then practically it has no bearing on the way that they behave. And then they tell us, and then the government will tell us, try to insist, that the way to be successful is not just relying on yourself, but we'll give you a lot of free things and we'll give you that leg up, and without the leg up we give you, you'll never be successful. And the South Africans have gone, no. And the South Africans who, black South Africans who are the target of this kind of, for want of a better word, propaganda, they see that and they hear it and then they go, no, I need to rely on my efforts to be successful. I cannot rely on this government because none of their actions has demonstrated any good faith effort to improve my life.
Well, Gabriel, I couldn't help looking at the survey and thinking that it's been painful to live under a bad government for nearly 20 years, certainly 15 years, but there's some upside to it, and you're seeing answers to these questions that are diametrically different, I would imagine, from what they would have looked like 15 years ago, when there was utmost faith in the government. And it may have cost us a lot of money and cost us a lot of opportunity, but I think that South Africans are understanding that this is more normal. It's more normal for individuals, together with their communities, etc., to make the difference, to be the difference that they want to see, and not rely on the state. South Africa is getting there, slowly, painfully, and some people are still well out of line in their thinking. Your survey showed that as well. And I really got to applaud the work that you're doing. And, we're going to keep getting you back whenever these come out so that we can interrogate them. Gabriel, it's always a pleasure to chat to you. Thank you so much. And we're going to give a shout out to Pace Car Rental that keep us on air. And to everybody that watched it, please subscribe. Gabriel Macon from the Social Research Foundation. Thank you very much. Don't go away too soon, and we're going to wish a goodbye to all of our viewers today. Thank you so much for watching.